in training. We have you here for about an hour tonight to really dive into programming for the fall, what it looks like, things you all should know, our specific CSI guidelines so that you all can start your planning and your prep before school begins at the end of the month. So just a few housekeeping things. First off, can folks put which clubs you're representing in the chat so we can credit you for attendance at the programming training? We'll be saving the chat and that's how we'll take it up. And then second thing is that we ask, please hold your questions until the end. We're going to be doing some breakout rooms at the end, placing folks in different cohorts. And so we have a lot of information to get through. So we want to make sure that we're able to get everyone the information, and then you have specific questions. We can talk about that in the breakout rooms. I think that's all my housekeeping things. Let me just make sure. Yes. So we'll go ahead and get started. Alrighty, so your presenters today, so y'all have seen us, but we'll introduce ourselves again. So my name is Jordan Harris. I use she, her pronouns. I am one of the assistant directors for student involvement in CSI. And so under my purview of what I work with is the AU Club Council, advising our graduate school councils, working with clubs as y'all are trying to host complex events, and working with students who are looking to get new clubs recognized through our new club registration process. And I'll pass it over to my co-Rod.
Thank you, Jordan. Hey folks, my name is Roderick, or Rod, Assistant Director for Student Involvement. I oversee co-advise undergraduate clubs, and I oversee student media, graduate leadership council. I will be talking to all your faculty advisors and staff advisors outside of CSI. I'll be communicating with them, doing monthly newsletters. And I'm also go-to person for club concerns right now. So if there's conversations you're trying to have about changing your constitution, maybe there's a organization dispute or things that you're just trying to work out as a group and you need someone to come in and mediate that, I'm your go-to person for that as well.
Awesome. So our agenda for the day, or for this afternoon, I should say. So first, we're going to go over some programming basics. So some specific definitions, looking at really deeply what complex events are. We'll round out our training with going over specific timelines for you all to know. Second, we'll be going through CSI guidelines concerning like student org travel, food, external guests, things like that. Third, we'll be taking you through our event planning guide. So just things you should be thinking about as you are doing your pre-planning for your events. Actually things you should be thinking about during the event, and then some after actions you should be taking before you kind of, put the event in your back pocket. And then lastly, we'll be talking about marketing, social media, promo, and then sharing some resources for you all to best advertise your upcoming events. I'll pass this to Rod.
So last Friday, you all should have received the email from President Burwell. She sent the email out pertaining to health and safety for the AU community members. And so as you all kind of digest some of the information we give you today, we just want to let you all know that, this is a living document, and we've been working on this living document up to the last minute. So even today, we're doing edits on this document. So we make sure that this is up to date and it kind of captures the entire community. And here's a couple of things that can kind of help you kind of process all of this. So we're going to say slow and measured a lot, and it's going to save us time, right? But it's also going to ensure that we can keep having events in person and just keep having events in general. So we want to make sure that we keep in mind everyone's health, the folks who come to your events, your members, maybe some potential members that come to your events, and also staff and faculty that might attend as well. Keep in mind that we designed this training, these guidelines, with 200 plus student organizations in mind, undergrad and graduate students, groups, and they all have hundreds of unique programming and events that you all throw at us, and we have to workshop those and think about the nuances. So we really try to we took a look at the entire scope of student organizations and came up with these guidelines using that. Friendly reminder, masks should be worn indoors at all times, and outdoors when there's 25 or more people, masks should be worn. And then the more complex the event, the more time there's needed to plan. So that 5-week process is gonna come up later. Jordan's gonna go through that a little bit more, and we're gonna go through it individually for cohorts as well. But you're gonna see other timelines of 2 weeks and things like that. But remember, just the more complex your event is, the more time we're gonna need to work with you to make sure you can have a very successful event, not because we're controlling anything, it's more just to make sure we don't miss anything. And so this is coupled with the fact that we're in this world of COVID, but we in this hybrid world, but we also know that there's a lot of things happen in the past. Things slip through the cracks. That's what I'm trying to say. Things slip through the cracks. So we made this 5-week process to make sure things don't slip through the crack. There we go. And just remember that the president said, and we're going to follow her lead here, that we're going to limit in-person events at the start of the semester. So that goes back to that slow and measured approach. So we're going to slowly roll out events. So as you look at events to have, what are the most important ones to have on campus? To have in person, and which one could have that more virtual hybrid model. And I got the next slide. And just remember that this is the context of student club and organization hosted or sponsored activities. So this isn't us making guidelines for students, individual students out there in the world. This is for clubs and organizations.
Thank you for the intro, Rod. So now we're going to break down sort of 3 categories that we have for programming for clubs. So the first one that we have is meetings. So meetings we define as internal club business that does not require any funding, any purchasing, or any in-person campus space. So that means for your general body meetings or your executive board meetings, you shouldn't be requesting funds from AUCC for that. You shouldn't be making any purchases for that. If you're just doing a meeting, they should remain virtual like we have been doing this past year. But that's kind of what we're looking at. And also with that, it's no event submission, no timeline required. Whenever you want to have your general body meetings or executive board meetings, how you see fit for running your organization, please feel free to do those things, but it shouldn't require any funding, no purchasing, and you should not be reserving space on campus for meetings. You want to make sure that for space that we are using it for programming, for events, and that we are being really responsible with our space use for this upcoming fall semester. So next we have community building initiatives. So community building initiative is an official club hosted program that does not require any funding, any purchasing, contracts, food, etc. And so really, we're looking at thinking about coming back in September. We imagine that this is a lot of what folks will be doing. We want you to use this time in our slow and measured to, again, relearn the campus, build internal community within your organization and externally throughout the entire club population, but really get to know each other again. You know, you haven't been in the same space or breathing the same air as anyone for about 1.5 years now. So it's going to take some time to get used to being in person and doing things kind of how they were like before. Some examples of a community building initiative could be like a welcome back kickback, or some folks like to talk about specific topics. So you could do like an open dialogue. But with this, they can be virtual and they can be in person. You can reserve space on campus for a community building initiative, but you should not be requesting funds from AUCC. You should not be doing any purchasing. You should not be having any contracts. So that means no paid speakers, no anything you're buying. And for food, we talk about food in the context of organization provided food. And so if you want to have like a bring your own sandwich, and you know every student brings a sandwich, feel free, use your best judgment. But if it's like the club is providing food, that shouldn't be happening with these type of initiatives. And also our timeline for these is going to require a submission on Engage. So you have to submit your event, and we're going to have a minimum timeline of 2 weeks before your event to submit with us. And really, this is just so that we can have a checkpoint with you all in case you may need may need to meet with us. You may need some additional documentation depending on what you're trying to do. But this is really just a check-in with us to say, hey, I'm trying to do this event. Y'all should know about it, and then we can follow up with you all accordingly, depending on what you're trying to do. So that's kind of a case-by-case basis. And then we have events. So events we define as official club hosted programming open to the AU community. So we have two kind of subtypes, and with this presentation, it kind of is in layers, so it gets deeper and deeper, so you'll understand more. But our first one is really a simple virtual event. And so that's similar to what folks have been doing all this past year. And so that is just a event that is fully virtual, that doesn't include any type of purchasing, funding. You can have a panel with non-paid speakers, or you can have like a club talk hosted via Zoom, but it's a really simple event. It's fully virtual. There's no complexity to it at all. This is going to require also an event submission on Engage and a minimum timeline of 2 weeks as well. And then here we have our complex event. So this is what y'all have been hearing about so much. And so a complex event, I like to think of it as if you have to ask yourself multiple questions about this event, it's probably a complex event. Any type of event that has layers, you're spending money, you're buying things, you have lots of questions, usually it's a complex event. So it includes one or more of the following, and we'll be diving into this in a few slides as well. But organization provided food, if it's hosted off campus, if you're having any type of paid speaker, any type of contracts, if you're buying materials, buying supplies, having an external vendor, etc. These events can be either in person, they can be hybrid, which is something new that we're kind of piloting out, or they can be fully virtual. And this is going to also require an event submission on Engage. And this is where that minimum timeline of 5 weeks comes in, because it has complexity. There are more layers, so it means more conversations and just some more touch points with CSI to make sure that your event can be successful. Some examples of this is like a tiny desk concert with like a local DC performer. That would be considered a contract. If you have any type of paid speaker, that would be considered a contract. If you're trying to have any type of food there, that would also be considered a complex event, because, you know, there's delivery of the food. We have to make sure that we're talking about, you know, safe food handling policies. So anything like that is considered complex, and it is on that 5-week timeline. So diving a little bit further, so going back to simple virtual events, again, it's like it's stated, it's simple, it's programming that's hosted fully virtual. It does not require any funding from AUCC, no purchasing, no organization provided food, no contracts, etc. But it may include a $0 guest speaker agreement. And so that's a document that we collect for any type of non-paid speaker. And so technically it's kind of a contract, but in this case, since it doesn't have those layers, it can be included with a simple virtual event. So if you're having a panel and you're not paying any of the people who are speaking on the panel and they're from outside of AU, then that would be something that we would have a guest speaker agreement for, but it would be considered simple in this case, because there's no layers. All right, diving into complex events. So complex events are defined by meeting either one or more of the following criteria. And I know a lot of folks have already heard these criteria, but I'll go over them again. Any type of contracted services, so a speaker, a service, a resource, anything that requires a contract, agreement, that is complex and it needs some more eyes on it. Contracts, student organizations are not allowed to sign contracts at all, so do not sign it. Do not sign it. That should go through our office. Any type of external vendor that is not coming from AU, if it's coming from an off-campus third-party person, it is external. The same example I used in the student leader meeting, if you're renting microphones and you're not renting them from AU, it's external, and it's probably a contract as well. Organization food, so anytime an organization is providing food during an event, again, it's complex. There's things we have to talk about and make sure that we have solidified with AU. If you're having an event off campus, so this means if you are hosting an event off campus. So I want to make sure that that is clear for folks. So a good example is if I think I have Tomas on the call from Cheese Club. So I use y'all because y'all are easy for an example. And so if you are renting out Cheesecake Factory, it's probably a contract, probably going to have an external vendor as well. That would be something that would be considered complex if you're renting out Cheesecake Factory. Now, if it's you all and 5 of members from Cheese Club who, you happen to be friends and you all happen to be in Cheese Club together, if y'all are going to Cheesecake Factory and y'all aren't advertising the event as a Cheese Club event, that is not complex. That would be on you all as individual students to use your best judgment with knowing their COVID safety protocols, knowing DC COVID-19 safety protocols, and using your best judgment with going out or off campus for something that you're doing. So want to make sure that's clear. A good word to remember, if you are hosting an event off campus, that makes it complex. And then lastly, we have considered controversial. So I like to read this definition word by word because it's a really good definition that we have. So any event that is designed to increase attention and community advocacy to increase the visibility of an issue or inspire collective action around a polarizing social position. So the same example I always use, if you are bringing Kanye West, some people really love Kanye West. Some people really despise Kanye West, but you're bringing Kanye West, that is going to bring lots of attention to your event, and folks are going to have a lot of opinions and things to say. So that would be something that is considered controversial. A good thing to ask yourself when you're planning your event, if you have to ask yourself, is this controversial? It probably is. And so that is a good measure to think about it in this case for that specific criteria. All right, so diving even deeper into complex events, there are 3 complex event types. So you can have a fully virtual complex event, which is just programming hosted fully virtual. You can have a hybrid complex event, and we have 2 kind of subtypes for that. So one is virtual with an in-person component, and second is a grab and go hybrid event. And then last, you can have an in-person complex event, which is programming that's hosted fully in person. So we'll dive deeper into each. So for virtual complex events, again, it will be hosted fully virtual. This is similar to, again, what folks have been doing this past year. If you're having a Tiny Desk concert with a local DC performer, that's a contract, so it will be complex. But we do have some special tools available if you wanted to reserve them. So CSI has our own Zoom webinar license that we can give to clubs for their events. And so if you're having something like a panel or something that you want just to look a little bit more professional and you don't want to host like a Zoom meeting, but you want to actually use like a Zoom webinar, that's something that we can talk about during our initial complex event meeting to see if it fits the needs of the program that you're trying to do. With our hybrid complex events, so the first subtype we have is virtual with an in-person component. And so that's a program that's some of it will be in person, some of it will be virtual, and it's kind of a hybrid model of it. So a good example I like to use is if you're having a movie night. And so what you could do for like a movie night, you can have some folks in person in like Wechsler Theater, which is like a theater kind of booking space on campus. And you can also be simultaneously streaming the movie virtually to the folks who don't feel comfortable enough yet to sit in like an actual theater with others, or for the folks who do want to be in some sort of community with others, they can be a part of that in-person component. And with all of our in-person events, we have to make sure that all clubs are following the AU health and safety guidelines that Rob was talking about earlier, and all of our CSI event guidelines that we're going to be talking about in a few slides coming up. And so also with hybrid events, I just want to point out that a lot of these are new for clubs, and we're going into a space, I know y'all have heard this a lot, we're going into a space that's not 2019, but we're also not 2020, we're fully virtual. So we want to challenge you all to think about your programming in innovative ways that may not seem like the first thought of you to have it. So I'll give a good example on this next one with our grab and go process. So our grab and go is going to be kind of like a two-parter. And so grab and go is used before a virtual event to pick up physical resources. So earlier in the day, if it's a Friday and you have 11 to 1, you'll do a grab and go where people can pick up popcorn and gummy worms. And then later on at 7 o'clock, you'll be streaming a virtual movie. And so it's a really cool kind of way to have a hybrid event, which has some part in person, some part virtual, but you're taking advantage of this new sort of event program type to get out to your peers. With grab and go space, you don't have to book that via EMS, like what you have to do like a room. That's going to be booked with CSI because we're going to host our own space for you all to do that. And again, with all our in-person events, we have to follow those guidelines that we're talking about. And so a really cool way that I'm going to suggest to all of you on the call, so I know AU loves having our speakers and clubs love to bring speakers in. A really cool thing or atmosphere that I feel like we're in right now is that with speakers, first of all, it's cheaper to get them virtually. They don't have to fly out to DC. They don't need a hotel. They don't have to go get a car or travel the metro to get to AU. And so a lot of speakers are wanting to do speaking gigs virtually, which is cool. And I know people are tired of being virtual, but one of the ways that you can incorporate it into your programming is having a grab and go with your speaker event. And so earlier in the day, you can have, I don't know, your snacks, your popcorn, your club merch, whatever you wanted to give out earlier in the day so that you can have that face-to-face interaction with your club members. And then later on in the day, you'll have that speaker come and you'll have that event. And so this is why I'm kind of telling you all to kind of challenge yourselves to think outside of the box with your programming. And just because something was done one way before doesn't mean that you have to keep it the same way now. All right, and then our in-person complex events. So of course, programming that's going to be hosted fully in person. And so again, here's this motto that we kind of have. Slow and measured is the motto for the fall semester, y'all. I'm not going to be moving as slow as the guy in Zootopia, but that's how we're trying to go for the semester. And so again, with all in person, have to follow AU health and safety guidelines and CSI event guidelines. Just want to point out again that we are masking indoors at all times for events. And then outdoors, if it's 25 or more people, we are masking. And then this other part, we are going to touch more on this in a few minutes with our guidelines. But with our in-person events, we are limiting it to the AU community until further notice. And so that really means that for your in-person events, it should be AU faculty, staff, students attending those in-person events. It shouldn't be students from other universities. It shouldn't be students who aren't connected with AU at all, just folks in the AU community, because we need to focus on ourselves, focus on getting our stuff together so that we can, feel comfortable as an AU community in what we're doing for our programming. All right, so this is your screenshotable moment. I encourage you all, if you're on your laptop, your iPad, your tablet, whatever you're on, please screenshot this. This is very helpful for y'all. So just a quick recap, meetings, there's no submission required, no timeline. They should be fully virtual. Feel free to have your e-board meetings and your general body meetings as you see fit for your organization. For community building initiatives, we have a minimum of a 2-week timeline for you all to submit that. They can be virtual or in person. They cannot include any sort of funding from AUCC, any purchasing of anything, any contracts, any food. And we're going to be opening event submissions for community building initiatives tomorrow, 5 p.m. And so I'm going to be sending out an email to all the folks who have been approved from re-registration with more details about that as well tomorrow. Simple virtual events, minimum 2-week of timeline to submit for that via Engage. They have to be fully virtual, no funding from AUCC, no purchasing of anything. And those things will also open, event submissions will also open tomorrow, 5 p.m. And then lastly, complex events. We have that minimum of a 5-week timeline for those. They can be virtual, hybrid, like we were talking about, or in person. If your program or your event meets one or more of the criteria, it is complex. And then event submissions for complex events are going to open on August 30th, which is the first day of classes for you all. And that also coincides with AUCC opening their allocation process and CSI Finance opening purchase requests. So it will all be aligned for you all coming up. And I'll pass the rock.
Thanks, Jordan. And before I go on, just to drive that point home, Jordan said AUCC. So if your club falls under AUCC, purchase requests can open until August 30th. And also my graduate leaderships and graduate school councils, same thing applies to you, August 30th. Same thing with student media, August 30th for any type of purchasing, any type of online ordering funding. All right, so let's talk about CSI guidelines. So I'm gonna start off with the student organization travel. Is there a specific time tomorrow that we should register for? It opens up at 5, so the submissions for everything opens up at 5. I'll answer these questions in a second. So student organizations travel, that's travel that is outside DC, Maryland, or Virginia. So anything in West Virginia is considered student org travel, but anything inside DC, the district, Maryland, or Virginia, that is not considered student organization travel. A couple definitions here. Day trip, travel where students are going to leave AU as a group and return back the same day. So again, if you're traveling to West Virginia and you come back the same day, that's a student organization travel. And then overnight, clearly is there for you. If you stay somewhere else off campus, it's considered an overnight, 1 night, 2 nights, wherever it might be, it's considered overnight. Student organizations sponsor trips inside the DMV area are considered just complex events, right? So they're just events that that you'll go through the normal complex event 5-week timeline. And then I have a little bit more to tell you about the student organization travel. So it's going to be a minimum of 5 weeks timeline. So that's when we want you to do a couple forms. The first form is the travel itinerary request form, and that's found on Engage. And that's before you book travel or you do registration, anything like that. Put your information inside there so it can be reviewed by a CSI advisor or grad assistant. So we can get the balls rolling on that, and it has to be 5 weeks out. The next form you should do at the same time is, I'm gonna skip that second bullet. The third bullet, the second form you should do at the same time is the student group domestic travel form, and that form is found on Risk Management Safety Services website, and we have links to that on our website. So we'll talk about resources and places you can go to find different links and forms in a little bit, but we have links to those forms that take you straight there to fill it out. And there's a travel waiver form that you have to fill out that goes with these 2 forms. This is going to be filled out by everyone that's traveling. So the other 2 are just 1 form you submit and they get reviewed for approval. The travel waiver form is a form that you will have to get everyone who's going to travel with you to fill out. Go back to that second bullet. Funds will be released or allocated for accommodations after CSI approval. So we're going to approve your travel, and that's based off all the information we get back from our risk management safety services. So that office is going to review their form. We're going to look at our form. We're going to meet with you all, and then approval happens then. We got to make sure we get that signed off. That's a safe trip to go. They look at COVID guidelines. And remember, guys, all the travel is domestic. We do not sponsor international travel. And then the final participant list is due before the 5 p.m. before the day before you all travel. So just if things change, like Rod decided not to go, but Jordan's going to go in his place, we just want to make sure we have everyone who's going to travel on that list. And Jordan should also, since she's new to the game, she should all go back and fill out the travel waiver too. And please note a couple of things. Under CSI, We will not allocate funds or facilitate purchases for airfare or flights, either domestic or international, none of that. And then CSI will be reviewing forms for student clubs starting tomorrow. So after 5 p.m., this form also will open up for you all to start start having the conversation about your travel. Wow, we should have did this earlier in the daytime. Next slide, please. Food. So any food provided by student organizations for events must follow the AU campus events and food service policy, which is also on our website. We're gonna also have a lot more information to update that. We just had a meeting with the catering service that gave us a lot more information about student catering services. Some best practices to keep in mind: clubs and organizations can't have a buffet style. And we say that because buffet style can get really crazy and out of hand. Everyone's hands in the food. We know not just COVID, but just disease spreads crazy whenever you have food and people putting their hands in it and all that kind of stuff. So we ask you to stay away from buffalo style and really think about the individual wrap or pre-package as your first option. We also encourage you all to use the AU student catering menu. We had a meeting with them yesterday. They have an excellent upgrade to their catering menu. Prices, everything's pre-packaged, everything's ready to roll out. It's really great. And then what about pizza? Pizza is fine, right? But we just ask you to use your best judgment when you don't order 15 pizzas and have everyone just go at it. Maybe think about there's 8 slices in a pizza. That means about 2 slices per person. Maybe 4 people share a pizza, and the next 4 people share their own box of pizza. So kind of break it out like that, so everyone won't just go free fall for, I want a cheese pizza, I want a pepperoni pizza, I want a supreme pizza. Kind of get everyone just to agree on what pizza they want and share like that. External guests. So there will be no in-person external guests until further notice. Jordan mentioned this earlier. In-person events are limited to AU community for now. So just keep that in mind. When it changes, we will definitely let you know, but that's what they gave us, and so that's what we're asking you all to adhere to. All campus visitors, once it does open, must abide by the university health and safety guidelines. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that yet, we'll drop the link in the chat for you all to kind of look through that manual. It's very thorough. It gives you all the information you need. It's a really helpful tool. So if you want to look at that, please. There are some nuances with student organizations, but most of that we're following to a T. They have to make sure they check. This is some of the things that are on that list. I won't read it to you all, but these are some of the things that are on that list in that policy book, handbook. What words? Off-campus events. Again, this is anything in the DMV area. Follow AU health and safety guidelines, and then the CSI's complex timeline and event guidelines. Best practice: start with your CSI advisor for guidance around event safety. So if you're unsure, maybe you're like, well, this seems like it might be a sponsored club thing. Maybe shoot us an email. We can talk through it with you. It turns out it might not be, right? You might just be heading out to the Cheesecake Factory to hang out as a group of friends. Familiarize yourself with the DC and the DC COVID health and guidance. So whatever DC has, obviously we need to follow those things. We're learning now that a lot of restaurants and places are now requiring your vaccine card to get in, to be fully vaccinated. So those things are kind of, we don't know what direction is going to happen, but make sure you follow DC's COVID health guidances. And use our best judgment. And we say our because, let's say folks who are part of AUCC, part of the council, you all have a party and an event for student orgs, and it's a great party, and Jordan walks in and you get really nervous because you know you're doing something wrong because you're not wearing masks or everyone's eating pizza. So use our best judgment and just say, if we walk in the room, how will we feel in it? It's a joke, but really just use your best judgment for a lot of these things. Co-sponsorships. Co-sponsorships are for organizations we do this because it helps with handling the costs of management and marketing events, and figure out who owns what. And so the guidelines here are the organization responsible for the entirety of the event is the owner, and the person that they should be the people that put in most of the work into Engage, most of the forms and things into Engage. This is definitely a complex process for CSI, and all participating student clubs should be included in the marketing. And let me give you guys a quick example. Let's just say the Happiest Club is hosting an event called Happy Faces, and they ask KPU to co-sponsor by giving them some coins. And KPU is like, yes, I'm there. So the Happiest Club is under AUCC, and so the whole process will follow AUCC's funding process. Flip side, if KPU was having the Happiest Club event, the smiley face, wherever I just said, event, and they asked Happiest Club to sponsor by helping by donating T-shirts or whatever, then they would follow KPU's process. And we did this because there's a lot of confusion. Some of you have already had your finance meeting with Luz Patterson, the Assistant Director for Finance and Operations. So it makes sense, but some of you are waiting next week or the following week to have your finance meeting, and it just got really crazy. Who paying for what? A lot of folks didn't get paid, and we want to make sure that we're putting our best foot out with some of these vendors and these people who are coming into the university to work with us, because we want to work with them again if they're great, right? We just want to make sure we're being very professional in our process. So we have co-sponsorship process, and again, once it goes into that first submission form, it comes to us. We're able to read it and look at it and figure out what's the co-sponsorship split here, and we can help you with that process.
Totally, and I just want to add that I know some folks sometimes don't know how our different cohorts work. And so AUCC, which houses the most of our recognized clubs and most of y'all on this call, AUCC has a more detailed process because it requires a review process for y'all to be allocated funding, whereas some of the programming boards and some of our other cohorts under CSI already have a set budget because that's how they work. And so they don't have to go through like a review process. And so sometimes they can get things done a little bit quicker than AUCC. And so if you are an AUCC club and you are having an event and you're having like a programming board sponsor, just know that you're going to have to follow that 5-week AUCC process, or depending on what you're trying to do. And you won't be following that shorter process because you are the club who is under AUCC and y'all are the owner of the event. So just to clear that up for some folks who I know sometimes it gets confusing. So
thank you, Joy.
Thanks, Rod. I think I'm next. Okay. All right, folks. Okay. We're on the third one. We're making time. We might not go over time. We're not going to put that into the atmosphere. Okay, so event planning guide. So this is really some things that you should be thinking about before you're planning your event, while you're planning your event, before you talk to your CSI advisor, before you talk to your council. You should be thinking about developing some goals and objectives. So the first one we have here is, what is your event purpose? So why are you organizing this event? What do you hope to achieve? What is the goal? What is the purpose of your event? Is it for community building? Is it for just, get folks engaged socially? Is it to educate folks about a topic or bring awareness or advocate for something? What's the purpose? Second, who is your target audience? Who is the event for? An event may look a lot different for, first year students, second year students versus upper class students who have been on campus a little while and they know more about AU. So who's your audience and how do they best, how are they going to get the best out of the event that they can? And then third is your event type. So which event type best suits the purpose of your event? So going back, especially under the complex events, thinking about, how can I incorporate a hybrid event into my programming schedule for the year? How can I keep this event virtual if I'm having a hard time finding space? If I'm trying to do an in-person event, maybe I'll just do one in-person event, see how it goes. And then when spring comes, I'll get my feet wet a little bit more because I kind of know how to navigate these new guidelines and protocols. So which one suits best for your event thinking about that critically, and then challenge yourself to think outside of the box, like I was mentioning before. So some questions to ask yourself when you're doing your planning. So first we have, what are your resources available? So what can you realistically do and how will you do it? If you are having this like big, crazy event that you want to do and you're like, where do I even start? That probably tells you that it's too big and you need to scale it down a little bit. So think about what can you realistically do? What is the team that you have in place to get these things done? Make sure you're not the only person doing it on your e-board. And how will you do it and who will you have supporting you on your team to do it? Inclusion. How can I make this a welcoming space for all of my target audience that is going to attend the event? If you are having an event and you do some surveying of some folks and say, hey, do y'all feel comfortable doing something in person? And 90% say, no, I don't feel comfortable. Don't have an in-person event. Have a virtual or have a hybrid event. Accessibility. What are the needs of your audience? Also, take some time to survey this before you have an event, put out something to your members. What do you need? If we're doing virtual, do you want more closed captioning? Do you need more gifts in our presentation? Do you like lecture style events? What do you need to feel included and to feel like you're getting the most out of the event that you can? And then recording. Can your program be recorded for the future? And so this is a really cool thing that we have now, after being in the virtual world for a little while, folks don't always have to attend the event when the event is happening. If they want to still get the information, you might be able to record it. If you're having a speaker, this is a really good thing to talk about beforehand for, especially for AUCC groups, before you request for funding. Ask the speaker, hey, can I record it? Some people may be like, yeah. Some people may be like, no, I need an extra $100 for you to record it. So you can have that conversation and know all these things on the front end before you're requesting funding or before you're doing your actual purchasing process for your event. All things to ask yourself. Also things, determine a budget. And so it's really important for clubs to make sure that you are being fiscally responsible. That is definitely one of the things that AUCC looks for when they're reviewing allocations, and all of our other cohorts working with your advisor to make sure you're being fiscally responsible. So I gave an example, and I'm going to give the same example, but I don't have Abalaji here to prompt me, but I will still say the same answer. But if you're wanting to have a speaker event, right, and you only have 10 people who say they'll attend the event, you're trying to get an $8,000 speaker, that's probably not the best fiscally responsible avenue for you to go through with your event. And so if you're like, hey, this content is so good, I really think it's worth $8,000. I want to request a funding from AUCC or from my budget, from my club. How can I make this happen? One way you can do it is looking at co-sponsorships, having more student organizations involved in the program. So it won't just be this one group with 10 students. It may be 10 groups with each having 10 students. More people will experience and get the content, experience the events. It will have a larger impact on the AU community. So think about your budget and be fiscally responsible. Follow the timelines. So based off the event type that you're trying to have, make sure that you're following the timelines, the 2 weeks, the 5 weeks, whichever it is, make sure that you're following within it, if not ahead of it. We always love for folks to be ahead. And then create a marketing plan. So if you're doing all this work, right, and you're putting in all this time and all this effort and all this energy, and then you have, not a great marketing plan and no one shows up, you're going to be bummed. And so make sure that you have a comprehensive marketing plan. How are you going to tell folks about the event? Are you using social media? Are you using word of mouth? Are you doing flyers around campus? Have that plan set so that, when you go into, we have all our logistics set, we're ready to plan, we're ready to market. Y'all have a plan for that and you know how you're going to engage people to come to the event. During your event, so just make sure that you have a day of event plan. Know that your team who's going to be on the ground knows what's going on and knows how the event's supposed to run, the logistics. Make sure each person knows the flow of the event. Make sure that you're assigning roles. So give each person on your team a specific task during the program. So if you're having a virtual event, You may need somebody to be the chat monitor. You may need somebody to put people in breakout rooms. We're having a hybrid. You may need a few people to pass out the things during the grab and go. We're doing it in person. You may need people to say, y'all need to stand in this line and keep your mask on. Have people assign roles. And then set your event guidelines. So just making sure that people know how the flow of the event is going to happen. And so if you're having an event and you have specific needs or housekeeping things, kind of like we modeled here, make sure that you announce that at the beginning of the event. If you're having an in-person event and you need to tell people about those health and safety guidelines and let them know you got to keep your mask on because we're in NGC 200 and we're all breathing the same air, let them know that ahead of time so they know the expectations that you have for the event and going forward with that. All right, and then after your event, some after action we want y'all to think about. First, conduct some event evaluation. So make sure that you're getting feedback from your participants. And so this fall hybrid, in-person, virtual nature is new for everyone. And so you want to make sure that you're getting actual feedback to inform how you're going to have future programming. If you did a hybrid event and it didn't go so well, and you ask folks like, hey, what can we change? Though that feedback can be really helpful for when you're having a future event. You're like, okay, I still want to do hybrid, but we're going to change these 5 things because it didn't work well the first time. So make sure that you're collecting that. It's a really cool thing that we have on Engage. So when you submit your event on Engage, you can automatically create a survey that will go out to folks, whoever clicks your join link via the Engage event, and it will automatically send it to them. So you don't have to do any sort of creating it on the back end and getting folks emails. You'll already be engaged. So if you're interested in that, we can always have conversations about that during our event meetings. And then lastly, completing outstanding tasks. So we know with a lot of clubs, y'all have an event and then we don't hear from you unless something went wrong. Somebody didn't get paid, y'all are missing something. So we want to make sure that you're kind of closing the loop on your event before you move on to the next thing that you're trying to do. So first, checking in with either your counsel or your advisor for any lingering tasks. Second, making sure that you're confirming that your purchase requests were closed with Luce, our finance assistant director now, period. Making sure that those purchase requests were closed, that either your items were bought, your speakers were paid, your contracts were finished, making sure those things and confirming it. And then lastly, we have here is for CSI purposes for contact tracing. We're going to be asking all clubs who have any sort of in-person event to submit their roster of who attended the event so that we can have that information on the back end. So with the contact tracing, we know things may come up and we know that it's hard to have all the names of who attended your event. And so we want to make sure that you're trying your best to collect the names, collect emails, collect, well, not phone numbers, but really emails and names to know who was at your event, and then submit it to CSI, and then we'll have that on the back end in case our AU health and safety people are like, something happened at this event, we need to know who was there. We'll have it on our in our data for CSI, and we can get that to the appropriate AU representatives so that they can carry out the work that they need to do. And so that will be a requirement for only in person, not if you're having a virtual, because y'all won't be in the same space. Yeah, and I'll go ahead and move forward. All right, Rod.
So we know so much happens on social media, so we want to give you guys some tips on how to use it for marketing and promotions. Some of you might already be using it for events. That's a step above what I'm about to give you all, but keep doing that. And let's chat about that because I think that's really awesome and dope. Social networks, right? Make sure that you utilize the social networks in their entirety. Facebook is different from Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. All those have different personalities, and so adapt your messaging, your promos using that, right? You might use more of the story sharing thing. Is it, yeah, story sharing on Instagram, and TikTok is great for quick videos to kind of get people excited and out there with it, right? Twitter is different, and I mean different because you can tweet sentences. One thing I do want to say is that make sure you're using them responsibly and that you're looking at the policies that they have and some of the terms and conditions that each of these social medias have. The tools, a lot of you are already using like Canva. It's an awesome tool. Later is a scheduling tool you can use to have when you're kind of planning your social media. You can put it in later and leave it, and then on the day of, it'll just shoot it out there for you already. So Linktree is another great thing to use. Just so think about the tools that can kind of amplify and enhance your social media presence. Creating a policy in your constitution or for your organization is, I think, is really important, right? There's a lot of things that happen on social media that's not regulated, but for your organization, you can regulate it a little bit. So when your members are your social media director or your social media chair, or just any of your members are out there sharing things, they can have a template of how they should speak and the tone from your organization. They're just not out there wilding out saying whatever they want to say. They're actually following a template. And just know when it's the organization versus individual beliefs. If I'm Broderick and sorry, Cheese Club, I'm lactose intolerant, then I'm not. But if I was, I won't be saying I'm lactose intolerant, cheese is a bad thing, and posting that on social media for the Cheese Club, right? So just make sure that you have, that's a very silly example, but you get what I'm saying. Organization versus individual beliefs. Make sure those line up, or if they don't line up, you probably should find someone else to do your social media. Audience engagement, know the audience makeup. AU has a thorough website. We just updated some of the makeup and demographics of the AU community this past week. So go online, find those things, know who your audience are, who you're talking to, right? So if you're just talking to a small group of, oh, look at that. You can be a lactose intolerance and be the president of the Cheese Club, period. Just know your audience and know them well. There's a lot of analytics. Google has a lot of analytics. So if you have different things, it can kind of break down who is actually opening your newsletters for, say, if you have newsletters, who's actually coming to your page, your splash page, or whatever it might be. Use those data points to kind of tailor your engagement with your audience. And again, with this engagement, like other clubs things, talk to other clubs, retweet, share, repost, do all those things with each other and build your audience engagement. You know, it might seem kind of selfish and to be like, I'm going to try to get more people to my club by using this other club, but work together, like co-sponsorships like Jordan mentioned and I mentioned earlier, but also just think about how you can kind of really interact with the community online. Management, come up with a management or a position. If you don't have a position already, someone who runs your social media, this is a big part of just marketing and promotion. So you might want someone that's on this full time on your team and not just have a bunch of people just do it whenever it's an event. Maybe actually think about creating a position if you don't have a position. If you do have a position, there's a lot of different tools and trainings. I actually created a training for marketing and promotions using social media for the College Media Association that I ran this past summer. And I'm happy to share some of those tools and talk you through those in your complex meetings. And they don't just pertain to media groups, they pertain to all student organizations. So I'm happy to talk to whoever. And disengagement, know when to turn it off, know when enough is enough. This is more probably on a personal level for some of you all. Just know when it's time to put the cell phone, the tablet, the computer away and disengage from social media just to get a recharge. Real life happens on both realities. So some things do happen online, but there's a lot of other things that are happening in the world. So make sure you disconnect and recharge and then go back with a fresh look at some of those things. And also, good rule of thumb is to plan out what you're going to say before you post it. I do a lot of re-editing or deleting because somehow Twitter still hasn't gotten the chance for you to actually edit your tweets. So I do a lot of delete and rewrite that sentence because I missed a word. You know, English is not my first language, it's Ebonics, and I'm proud to be a Ebonics speaker. Jordan, give me that look. I think that's it. Next slide, please. Resources. So I talked about this before. The AU Forward is a great resource. Look at that plan that the university dropped. A lot of the things that we, for our guidelines, we drew from that to kind of give you guys some parameters to move together as a community. University event scheduling, as some of you know, or maybe not know, 25 Live is no longer the platform we're going to use to request space on campus. It's called EMS, not to be confused with other EMS, but EMS is going to be the platform, and more information of that is going to come out in the next coming weeks. So look out for emails of that. That's through the university center, so they're going to be reaching out, giving you all training and things like that of how to correct reserve space on campus. CSI, connect with your CSI advisor. Again, we're your best tool in coming back to this hybrid model on campus. So those complex meetings are very important. That's why we're scheduling them, or we're having those things in the beginning. When you have your check-ins, if you have one-on-one check-ins, if you have emails, just send it to us. And then use the resource guide that's on our website. If you go under club resources, you'll see club finances, and under that you'll see resource guide on our CSI AU page, and that is a whole page dedicated to helping you all navigate your experience as student leaders. So there's a lot of resources, a lot of links to forums that go straight to Engage, go straight to other resources from other offices on campus. So make sure you utilize that resource page. We're going to update it with videos like these throughout the year, so you can kind of refresher to go back and look at things. You can use your government boards, AU Club Council, Student Media Board, the Graduate Leadership Council, and the Fraternity Sorority Life Councils. They're all great resources. Those are the leaders that we interact with at CSI the most. So those are going to be the folks that may have a little bit more information. So go to them, use those folks as resources as well. And I think now we're going to go into breakout rooms.